our focus is going to be on pollinators. So we are going to spend a lot of time with our resident botanist and pollinator expert, Mary Rose Kuhlman. For those of you who are unfamiliar with MPG, we are over 15,000 acres. We're located in the Bitterroot Valley on the east side of the valley between Lolo and Florence. And we are a privately owned parcel that is managed for conservation. So our goal is to take lands that have seen significant human impacts over the years, whether that's through agriculture or cattle ranching or timber production or whatever it may be. And we're trying to figure out how to make those lands as biodiverse as possible and as native species rich as possible, moving forward into a hotter, drier future. And we are making all of the research on how to do that work publicly available to everyone. And education is a big part of that. So we try to do programs just like this to connect everybody out there in the world with the research that we're doing here on the ranch. So today I'd like to introduce you to Mary Rose, and she's going to tell you all about bees. Come on in, Mary Rose.
Hi there. I'm Mary Rose Kuhlman. Let's see, make sure I can see everyone. There we go. Nice. I'm Mary Rose Kuhlman, and I am a botanist at MPG Ranch. I'm also a pollinator expert, I suppose. I wouldn't say expert, but I also studied native pollinators, especially native bees. And so I've run a monitoring program for 7 years at MPG Ranch, where we look at what bee species occur where on the ranch, in what habitats, and when they occur. And yeah, so I'm here to talk to you about that today and answer any of your questions and wow you with the native bees of MPG Ranch. So I got into this. I was mostly doing a lot of, as a botanist, I was mostly doing a lot of veg surveys. So looking at plants and flowers and where they occur and where they do best, because restoration is a big part of the work that we do here on the ranch. And as part of that, I started looking at the bees. So when we restore plants, we not only want to restore, the vegetation, but we also want to restore the animals and the birds and also the native insects. And so bees are a part of that. And one thing that's really important about native pollinators is that they are specifically, they pollinate native plants. Native plants can't make seeds without native pollinators to make sure that their genetics move on, go on into the future generations. And so restoration projects here are not successful unless we have native pollinators. And so one of the things, when I started out, I knew very little about bees per se until I started researching them and catching them and seeing them and holding them and pinning them and recording them. And I have been really blown away by the diversity here on the ranch. We have documented over 230 species of bees on the ranch so far, and that is pretty phenomenal. So
I can see that the bees are just starting to wake up on that bush behind you.
They are?
And and I'm wondering actually if we should take a look at the bee cam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and spotlight the bee cam for everybody to see. And what we're looking at, maybe you could tell us a little bit about, first off, the plant that we're looking at and where it grows.
Right.
And then we'll look for some bees. And if you happen to see a bee coming to the bee cam,
we can talk about it.
We can talk about it. Ms. Dowling's class, I'm going to put you on bee spotting. And so if you see a bee, I would like you to call out, "There's a bee," and we'll take a look.
So this plant in the bee cam is a golden currant. This is a really phenomenal plant. It has these beautiful yellow flowers. The thing that makes it phenomenal is it's got lots and lots of flowers, lots and lots of nectar and pollen, which is important for the nutrition of native bees, as well as other pollinators like flies. Flies can be pollinators as well, and butterflies, though I don't see a whole lot of butterflies on currant, but we do occasionally see some. These flowers, once they're pollinated, will eventually make these lovely currant berries, and the currant berries are important food for birds. So this is a great restoration species. We normally see this in, I mean, this species can occur in lots of different places, but I tend to see it in more places that have a little more water, that have a little more disturbance. So it's kind of a gravelly, like higher disturbance plant. It's actually very resilient, and you can grow it. It grows naturally in lots of places, but you can also successfully grow this as a garden plant as well.
So I have a question about this plant. I'm looking at these flowers and I'm noticing that they look like trumpets.
Yes.
Does that mean that a special type of bee can only pollinate them, or can any?
Right. So these little trumpet flowers.
So I'm going to come back and I'm going to spotlight you again. And
okay,
if you want to hold that right up to the camera.
Sure. Let's see. I gotta orient here.
Yep. Oh, you're doing good. Yep.
Yep. Okay. So here's this is one of these flowers, and they are a trumpet shaped flower. And you can see this is probably the little stigma sticking out right here. And the nectar is going to be inside. Let's see if I can pull this. Oh, I can't really. It's pretty. There we go. So you can probably see some of the flower parts in there, and the nectar is going to be inside this tube. So generally, if the nectar's down here, then it's going to take a bee with a longer tongue to reach down into this nectar. So the bees we see on this, in general, will be longer tongue bees.
Oh, wow. So I want to see if there's any questions so far from anybody that's watching.
Okay.
This is Darlene's class. Would you like to start us off?
Yeah, this has to be about what we just talked about. So, do you have a question about that? What we just talked about? What do you want to know, Jackson?
I didn't know go to flowers and they pollinate.
Okay, but that's what we've been learning. So I think a question we have is, what kind of bee has a really long tongue?
That's a fantastic question. So bees are classified as being short tongue bees or long tongue bees. And in general, bumblebees. Oh, yes.
What if we use this guy?
Do you want this up to the camera?
Let's take a look.
You know, I think if you hold it straight up and down, yep, and
Oops.
turn it whoop, just like that.
In fact, I could be your holder.
Okay.
How about that?
Let's see.
That's pretty good if you come closer there.
Awesome.
Okay. So this is a really sweet board. This is all different bees that have been caught at the ranch. And here on the bottom are bombus. Those are bumblebees. Bombus is the genus name. So this is part of all animals have a name. And this grouping, bombus, is sort of a closely related group. All of these, bombus or bumblebee, have a long tongue. These guys just above them, oh, that's maletic. A little bit farther up where it says Anthophora, those are our digger bees. And they too have a long tongue, and we see a lot of them there. But in general, long tongue bees are in this family Apidae. So at the top, it says Apidae. I'm not sure if you can see that. Apidae contains bees, actually has the honeybees in it, all the bumblebees, longhorn bees, carpenter bees, digger bees, and even some cuckoo bees are in this group.
Wait a second. You said digger bees.
Yes.
Do they dig
They
in the
dig,
ground? Do they
yes.
really truly dig?
They dig. Yes. They live in the ground. They dig. So that would get into questions about nesting. So digger bees live by themselves. They don't live in a colony or a hive or anything. Most bees are solitary and live by themselves. The females will dig, for digger bees anyway, females will dig in the ground like a little hole, and they will, and a tunnel, and they'll tunnel into the ground, and they will bring their pollen and nectar back and make a little loaf out of it, and they will lay one egg on that loaf, and then they will kind of seal up that area like a little cocoon with a little bit of soil, and then in the next space they will do the same thing. They'll collect some pollen and nectar, make it into a little loaf, and lay an egg on top, and that all happens underground. So bees actually spend digger bees spend a lot of time underground in the soil. So
I had no idea. I wonder if Mrs. Fury's class has any questions. And you guys can unmute your microphone. You can also use the chat to go ahead and chat in any questions if you would like. And while we're waiting for them, how about the bumblebees? You said that those were another type of bee that's using this. Do they also live underground?
So that depends on their species, and some of them do live underground. Bumblebees they have a colony, but it's very different somewhat different from honeybees. So people usually know honeybees, and there's a queen and there's workers, and they live in these, boxes, and we collect honey. Those are the only bees those bees are native to Europe. They're not native to North America, and humans like them because they can get honey from them, and then we can use them in agriculture to pollinate, but they're not native here. And the way that they live is totally different from the way most of our bees live. So bumblebees, like what you asked about, they have a colony as well, but they're not a perennial colony, so they don't persist year after year. They only last for 1 year at a time. And a queen emerges from the ground. She has hibernated over winter, and she has all the eggs in her that she needs. She's already mated before she hibernated. She finds a nice place to live, and sometimes that's in an old mouse nest. Sometimes it's in the wall of someone's house. Sometimes it's in the spaces in a rotten log. Sometimes it's where tall grasses, the dead leaves will fall over and kind of make a little bit of a space. Sometimes it'll be in there. Sometimes it'll be in a hollow where a tree has rotted. So the places where the roots used to be is now a space in there, and sometimes they'll live there. So a queen will found a colony there. She'll start collecting pollen and nectar. She'll start laying eggs, and then when her eggs hatch into workers, the workers start helping, and the queen will stay home, and the workers will go and collect pollen and nectar, so to nourish the new babies, the new eggs that are being born. And so at the end of the year, then males are born and new queens are born, and they go off and fly their separate ways, and will mate with bees from other colonies. And then the new queens who have just mated will hibernate. They'll go underground and hibernate, and all the rest of the bees will die for the season.
We've got several questions coming in. One from the live stream, and then one from Mrs. Dowling's class.
All right.
So, I don't know if you can hear it down there. You're going to have to relay it if you can.
Okay.
You said bees are waking up now. Do all bees wake up in the spring, and where do they go in the winter?
Great question.
You might repeat it just in case.
So the question is, bees are waking up now. Are all bees waking up in the spring, and where do they go in the winter? This is a fantastic question. Bees are actually really short-lived. The part where you see them flying only lasts for a few weeks for an individual. So not all bees wake up right now, just the same way that not all flowers bloom right now. So remember the close relationship between bees and flowers, that there are different flowers that bloom at different times of the year. So if you're in Montana right now, there's golden currant blooming. You might see sticky geranium blooming. There's buttercups and yellow bells, some pasque flowers, but right now, like for example, clematis is not blooming quite yet. So bees need to be flying and collecting pollen and nectar all throughout the years, but not all species of bees fly throughout the year. So spring bees, which are mostly, there's a lot of mining bees right now. There are mason bees right now, and there are digger bees right now, and some bumblebees. They are flying right now and collecting resources for their babies, for their eggs. They're laying eggs and, collecting pollen and nectar and building their nests. And then they will lay their eggs and their eggs will develop. But once they've finished laying their eggs, those individuals will die. And so as summer goes on, for example, we won't see as many mining bees, but we'll start seeing more of other types of bees. So we might see more worker bumblebees. Like right now we're seeing queen bumblebees. And once their eggs start hatching, we'll start seeing more workers and fewer queens. And then later on in the year, we'll start seeing more of our summer flying bees. And like I said, the flying part is just for a few weeks and then they will die, but their eggs or their pupa will be in the nest growing and developing, and they will just be hibernating essentially over the winter. So if they don't die, the flying bees will die for the most part. And then the eggs and pupa will be in the ground, in the nest, or wherever they nest. Sometimes it's a stem, basically waiting until the following season when their flowers are available again.
So we have a question. Two more questions coming in. That was awesome.
Okay, good. Sorry, that gets.
We have two more questions. So Mrs. Dowling's class says that they have a favorite bee.
Oh.
And their favorite bee is the mason bee.
Oh.
And they just love how they use mud to build their nests.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And I should say, mason bees are long-tongued bees. So when we were talking about long-tongued and short-tongued bees, mason bees are another long-tongued bee, all in that family, Megachilidae.
So awesome. Where in the ranch would we find, or on what flowers, I would say, would we find mason bees?
I see them a lot on penstemons. So that's a big one. I've been seeing them, actually recently I've been seeing them on dandelions, some big black mason bees on dandelions. I also see them, you would probably see them on this golden currant behind me. I see them on balsam root. So that's like a daisy looking flower, if you guys are not familiar with that. And yeah, and then penstemon, when that starts blooming, that's more of like a tubular flower, and mason bees like to get right up in there and get pollen all over them and get to the nectar. And you'll also see them on blossoms like apple trees and in orchards. So
I love it. So we have one. So here's what I'm thinking. We have one question from the live stream that's going to come in. Then I would love for you to do a demonstration of maybe how you study our pollinators after we answer this question. And then we have a really big question from our friend Graham.
Oh,
we're going to save that for just a minute.
Okay.
But Kathleen, go ahead. Tell us what our live stream, the questions of the live stream.
We have a teacher from a field-based program in wildland studies in Washington. And
nice.
They are wondering, they see nest entrances in the central Washington shrub steppe habitat. Are these digger bees? The entrance is a small tube sticking out of the ground.
Ooh, is it sandy soil?
I don't know.
So
let us know in a minute.
So it's hard to say. And I'll be honest, I study bees on flowers, and I'm not necessarily bees nesting, but where you see bees nesting, they live where they nest, just like people. They're central place foragers. So where we live is very close to where we work and where we get our food, and they are going to be, the bees you see, the nest entrances you see are going to be for bees that you see in that area, if that makes sense. So if it's got a little tube coming up for it, that kind of makes me think of a Calides bee. But it certainly doesn't have to be a Calides. But I know that in a lot of places, Calides are coming out. I don't tend to see them here this early. They're a little bit later in this area, but you may have a species that's coming out now.
Yep, and they did say yes, Sandy. So
Oh, okay. I bet it's Calides. Yeah. And they'll have like a little, sometimes they'll even have it'll be almost like a neighborhood where will be several nest entrances in an area.
Do we have a
Calides on
Yes.
here? We do.
that was a real
This is probably not like your Calides, but we have a Calides. I'm not even sure if you can see that right
Here, let me help.
here.
If you want to point to them, I will make sure they're in the right spot.
Right there.
Oh, okay, there it is.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'm wondering if you could show us kind of the work that you do and tell us a little bit about, maybe take us through an afternoon on the ranch.
Okay.
Let's do it as a waggle dance.
Only honeybees waggle dance, so I'm not going to do it. So the monitoring that I do is when I go out on the ranch, I have several sites that I go out to, and it's not just me. I have a crew of people who help me with this. So it's hard for anybody to do anything alone, right? We always need people to help us. And so I have a fabulous group of people who come and help me, and we go out to different sites. And what we were trying to see is how the bee communities change throughout the year and year to year. So we start sampling. So I'm not doing this long the monitoring this year, because I've already done 7 years of it, and that's lots of data. But what I do is usually this time of year, we'll go out and we have these pre-selected sites, and I put bowl traps out. So we do trap the bees, and they land into the bowls, and the bowls are out for the entire day, and the bowls have soapy water in them. The bees go there because they're colored to make the bees think that they could be flowers, and the bees will land in the bowls. They do drown, and then I collect them at the end of the day, and then I identify a few of them, but mostly I send them off to a bee taxonomist. Taxonomists are super important scientists who help us identify an animal or insect to species, and they're experts in their field, and they're very, very important because taxonomy is a difficult science. So I work with a taxonomist, and he identifies the bees for me, and then he tells me what I've got. So those are the bowl traps. In addition to the bowl traps, and well, the thing that's good about the bowl traps is you don't have to be there. You just put them out, and the bees in the area check them out, and you come back at the end of the day. I come back at the end of the day and collect the bees that have landed in the bowl traps. So that's called passive sampling, which means I don't really have to do anything. But I also do active sampling, and that means I do stuff. So I take a net. This is my net. I made this. So just so you know, anyone can make an insect net. It's just made with like kind of a light canvas, and this is like wedding veil material. And it's not particularly neatly sewed, but I made it. And it's on a wooden stick here, and this is like a hard wire. So what I do is I go to those sites where those bowls are at, and I look for flowers. And because I know that where the flowers are where I'm going to find the bees. And it's kind of it is like a full body activity. You have to be listening, you have to be quiet, you need to be watching, and you need to move slowly. So I'm just going to demonstrate this. I probably won't catch a bee, but I will find a blooming area, listen for the bees. I can hear all kinds of bees on this right now. And if I were to see one, which I don't see one yet, I'll just demonstrate catching it though. I tend to hold this close and come up slowly, and then shake my net so the bee falls down, gets pushed down to the end of the net, and then I twist my net over so the bee can't fly out. and then I'll hold the net up like this. Bees often want to fly up, and then I'll catch it at the end. And I usually put it in, well, I have them here, but it's a little hard to reach right now. But then I'll put the bee into a jar, and I'll catch it. And a lot of times I will, of course, kill them. That's how you study insects.
Is this one of your jars?
Yes.
Wonderful.
So I will put it in this. This is called a kill jar, and it's usually charged with something that causes the bees to die. And I'll put them in there, and then I will have a bee specimen. And then, of course, an important part of science is labeling everything. So you need to make sure I need to label what flower it came off of, what time of day it is. I have a data sheet that I fill out, and I have a data sheet filled out for every site, and then I document every flower that I catch a bee off of, so I can match the bee with the flower and the site and the date. And I take all that, and I'm able to see what bees are in what places when, and how the bee community changes over time. And then since I do that year after year, I can see how the bee communities change year to year, not just through the months, but through the years.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I bet there's some questions about what you just shared with us. And while people are thinking about those questions, again, you can type them in or you can unmute. We have a really big question from Graham, which I alluded to. So Graham has been working really hard. He's been working through the pollinator challenge, it looks like. And he wants to know, do digger bees use the poisonous pollen to trick cuckoo bees? And this is the first part of the question.
Oh.
Let's start with that part, and then we'll go to the second part.
Okay. So, no. So digger bees, they generally don't use poisonous pollen. There is a mining bee that uses poisonous pollen. And that could be, so if you had studied, I believe Andrena astragali, which is a specialist bee on death camas. And nobody knows really why it uses only this pollen, like what good purpose it serves. It could be that like an escape mechanism where it escapes predation from cuckoo bees. So that's a possibility with that particular mining bee. Now, most bees don't use poisonous pollen, or certainly not that poisonous. And their cuckoos are usually, so digger bees are vulnerable to cuckoo bees in the genus Melecta, which means that there's a specific group of digger bees that is actually closely related to digger bees. Or I'm sorry, there's a specific group of cuckoo bees that's closely related to the digger bees that preys on those digger bees. So they intimately know their habits, and they'll follow them. You'll see them a lot of times on the same plants, and the digger bees will go off. They'll like go to their nest and do their digger bee thing, lay their eggs, and the Melecta will look and see where they have gone. And when the digger bee is gone to collect more nectar and pollen, those cuckoo bees, the Melecta, will go into their nest. They'll break into their nest and lay their own eggs. So it's more of a cat and mouse or hide and seek situation for digger bees. Now for the mining bee, the death camas bees, that is a little bit of a different story. But
so,
sorry, that was a big question and you got a big answer.
Big answer. And so there's a second part. So will the pollen that they collect, so they've collected their pollen, they've taken it back, will that be poisonous to the cuckoo bee larva, even though it isn't poisonous to the digger bee larva? So
okay. So this is back to probably the specialist bee. So if it's a specialist bee, then somehow it's physiologically adapted, which means that its body has developed mechanisms to deal with that poison in the pollen of this particular plant. So we're probably talking about this one plant, death camas, which is poisonous to everybody except for this one bee. So it's not really well known, the cuckoos on the death camas bee, but most likely they are also susceptible to the poison of the death camas bee, which is probably why, or one of the many reasons why, death camas bees use death camas is to reduce the amount of predation on their nest. There's no, I've only seen conjecture about this particular bee, you know, just suggestions about why it might be using this highly poisonous pollen. And that is one of the suggestions, is that to escape nest predators.
Whoa. Graham, that was a fantastic
That was
question.
not only a fantastic question, but it required a lot of explanation on my part too. It's not straightforward. We had to talk about physiology, we had to talk about behavior, lots of things. So great question.
Mrs. Dowling says that Graham is elated with your answer.
Oh, good.
That is fantastic. Stephanie, do we have any questions from the live stream?
We do.
Oh, yay.
Somebody's wondering if when you're catching the bees, are you worried about getting stung?
I'm not worried about getting stung, and I'll tell you why. Bees generally don't want to sting you. And so, most bees, even if they do get scared, so bees sting because they're scared, right? They sting as defense. They're not really aggressive. So you may have heard stories about killer bees or whatever. We don't have those here. And most bees are stinging in defense of themselves and their nests, right? So when you scare them, they want to protect themselves. When I'm catching bees with a net, they do get scared, and sometimes they do try to sting. But as it turns out, most bees their stinger is so weak that they can't even penetrate your skin. So bees may even try to sting me, and I don't get stung. Now, bumblebees can pack a wallop. They can sting, and I've been stung by bumblebees. But I haven't been stung very often. And also, I don't hold it against them. I'm catching them and they're scared, and I can see why they might want to sting me. So I'm not worried about it. But I want to make it clear that I have caught thousands and thousands of bees, and I've probably been stung about 3 times. So it's really unusual to get stung.
Awesome. So Kathleen's telling me that we have a ton of bees on the bee cam at the moment.
Oh,
I'm going to pull the bee cam back up.
I wonder if we should all just be really quiet and see if they can hear them too, because they are really buzzing. I will go on mute.
Wonderful.
oh, it's even labeled bee camera. Yeah, I see it too. It's a meadowlark. Bees we mostly see on this plant are digger bees in the genus Anthophora.
Wonderful.
And I'm seeing a lot of them in this behind me. I wonder if I can, wow, I may be able to get one. Ooh. Yes, on a heuchera.
Oh, and there's a
Nope.
Mary Rose in action.
I'm going to try to catch a bee for you. These are some of the fastest bees, these really digger bees. Although they're big, they're the hardest to catch.
Fastest bees in the West.
They're the fastest bees in
Over
the
to
West.
the left, about chest height.
I got one.
No match for your skills.
That's right. That's right. So I'm going to put it in this kill jar, but it's not charged. I don't want anyone to worry. This is just a regular jar. It won't kill the bee. So see how I've got the bee at the top of the net here, and I'm trying to pull out some of the plant part so that I can just get the bee into the kill jar. This usually takes me a little bit of time. And I'm just going to invert this so that you might be able to see. Oh, she's caught in the netting. There we go. Let's see. Can you see her?
Oh, yeah.
So there we have digger bee.
And let's take a look. So I'm seeing, is that pollen on her legs?
Yes, so it looks like she's starting to collect pollen. She just has pollen mostly on one leg.
She's just starting her day.
Yep, she just started work. This might be her second or third trip of the day. On her right leg, she's got a little bit of pollen. It's kind of a light yellow for right now. Pollen comes in different colors, and so sometimes you can tell just from the color of the pollen what plants they are most likely on. So yeah, this bee is a beautiful digger bee.
Oh, that is so cool. Well, I think we have time for one last round of questions.
All right.
Before it's time to go and get ready for our next class. So
I'm ready for your questions.
wonderful. Mrs. Dowling's class. Do you want to start us off? We lost the live stream too. Oh, the live stream's busy at the moment. Here's a question. Do all bees make honey?
That's a great question. No, the only bees that make honey in North America are honeybees. And I'm not sure if you've studied this, but honeybees are from Europe. They're not from North America. They can be considered livestock, just like chickens or cattle. Humans grow them, humans transport them around, and humans like them, and they're only here because as people, we like their products. So just like for chickens, we like their eggs. For honeybees, we like their honey. So those are the only species in North America that make honey. Now, that said, bumblebees do make a kind of a honey, but it's hardly any. So we can't harvest it. It's only for the bees. There's just only enough for themselves. And they do but they'll make a tiny little bit for themselves. So just bumblebees, but there's nothing makes honey the way honeybees do. Honeybees are just super special that way. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Kathleen, we're just wondering if there's any last questions from the stream.
I think we're good.
Wonderful. And
right.
We'll give Miss Dowling's class just a second to make sure they're good as well. All right.
Well, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you participating today. And thank you so much, Mary Rose.
Of course,
I
my
have learned
pleasure.
a ton about bees, and I can't wait to observe some in my yard as my flowers are starting to bloom.
Yeah, that's a fun thing to do with your friends, with your parents, is to watch bees in action and see how they move their bodies through flowers and put the pollen on their bodies, on their bellies, on their legs. It's just really neat to spend time watching flowers and bees together.
Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We will see the next crew at 10:30, I believe.
Great.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.